Honorable members, we are considering the procedure from the amendments to the standing orders. Okay, read.
Amendment to Standing Order 25A.
I propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 25A be now approved.
Honorable Chair, I move that Standing Order number 25A be amended as proposed in the Standing Order. Madam Speaker, this is just for the Speaker to designate a place where the Cabinet Secretaries will be coming to answer the questions. And this time round, we're including all the Cabinet Secretaries apart from the Cabinet Secretary for Finance. Madam Speaker, I move.
I propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 25A be now approved. Can give one person to speak? Let's give Yes, Honorable Member for Funyula.
Chair, with your indulgence, I will request the mover to just clarify that Part C, other persons to make submission or presentations before the House. Does it in any way mean that the Cabinet Secretary can delegate to any other person to come and make this representation to this House? Or does it allow any person anywhere, either holding government position or not, to come and answer questions before the House? Probably needs to clarify that for the benefit of the members, because other persons, what does it really mean? Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Yes, the mover.
Madam Chair, these amendments relate purely to Cabinet Secretaries. And so I just want to assure the member that that particular paragraph is meant, for example, some years back, the last Parliament, we had the Honorable His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete come to the country, and we had to get a place for him to address the Assembly. That's what it meant. That kind of visitors, if they were here, then they would be allowed in the chamber under that subsection, but not any other public officer that is not the Cabinet Secretary, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Is the mood of the House that we put the question? Yes. I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order number 25A be now approved. Will as many of the other opinions say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendment to Standing Order 30.
I propose the mover. Okay.
Now, Speaker, I beg to move that the Standing Order number 30 be amended as proposed in the order paper. Madam Speaker, the idea here is just to ensure that on Wednesdays of every week, we have time between 2:30 or just after 4 p.m., 9 p.m. So the amendment just to enable the Speaker of the day to extend the times of sitting to accommodate the coming into the House of the Cabinet Secretaries, Madam Speaker. Nothing more.
I now propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order number 30 be now approved. We put the question? I now put the question that amendments to Standing Order number 30 be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendments to Standing Order 39.
Mover.
Waiting for the mic. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the Standing Order number 39 be amended as appears in the Standing Order, in the order paper. Madam Speaker, the idea here is just to enable the clerk to publish in advance the tentative list of the CSS that will be appearing the following week, so that members are informed, the public is informed, and anybody who wants to know who is appearing the following Wednesday, who is to answer questions, Madam Speaker, nothing more than that.
I propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 39 be now approved. I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order 39 be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendments to Standing Order 40.
Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that Standing Order number 40 be amended as appearing in this order paper, and Speaker, to enable this House to set aside 3 hours every Wednesday afternoon, upon which there'll be time for cabinet secretaries to appear to answer the questions or give reports to this House. So the idea there is to just set aside the 3 hours on Wednesday afternoons.
I now propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 40 be now approved. I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order 40 be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendments to Standing Order 42A.
Mover.
Chairperson, Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that Standing Order number 42A be amended as appearing in the order paper. Madam Chairperson, this is to principally allow questions to be replied to before the House and before the committees, and to align references to committees in part with the shift to questions being replied to in the House. Before it was committees, now it is before the House.
I now propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42A be now approved. What's your point of order, Honorable Russell?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Whereas I agree with the mover on that suggestion. But what happens if a member wishes to raise the question from the floor of the House and it had not been indicated in the order paper? Do we put it in the standing order or it is just allowed?
I think I'll allow the mover to respond.
Madam Speaker, the reason this was important is that we are saying that questions later, in fact, the questions are going to be answered to be within 14 days, but questions are asked in advance. So the only questions that can be asked on the spur of the moment are follow-up questions. So you cannot ask a question on the day when the CS is appearing. And that's why we said earlier, and we come into it just now, that the majority leader will be telling us 1 week in advance that the following week we'll answer the following questions by the following cabinet secretaries.
Thank you. That's well addressed. Thank you. I now propose that I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42A be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendments to Standing Order 42B.
Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that Standing Order number 42B be amended as proposed in the order paper. Now, Speaker, this is to allow a member to request the Speaker to defer a question or withdraw a question where the question sought to be asked has been overtaken by events, and further, to allow a question to include a request for a report from a cabinet secretary.
I now propose the question that amendments to Standing Order 42B be now approved. I now put the question that amendments to Standing Order 42B be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendments to Standing Order 42C.
Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that the amendment to Standing Order 42C be made as proposed in the Standing Order. Madam Speaker, this is largely about the manner of disposal of the questions, in terms of the Cabinet Secretary being able to provide physical and electronic copies of a reply to a question, alongside coming to answer the question on the floor of the House.
I now propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42B be now approved.
42C.
Or 42C be now approved. I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42C be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many of that opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendment to Standing Order 42E.
Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that Standing Order 42E be amended as proposed. And the reason for this amendment, Madam Chairperson, is to require the Cabinet Secretaries to provide replies to questions within 14 days of their being asked, and where there's an urgent question, provide an answer within 48 hours.
I now propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42E be now approved. I now put the question that amendments to Standing Order 42E be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay?
No one.
The ayes have it.
Amendment to Standing Order 42G.
Honorable Chairperson, I beg to move that Standing Order 42G be amended as proposed standing orders when I speak, Madam Chairperson, to provide for replies to questions directed to commissions or independent offices to be given before committees. Madam Chairperson, we thought that independent offices and commissions do not rank as Cabinet Secretaries, and therefore questions directed to them would still be answered before the respective committees. That is the import of that amendment.
I propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42G be now approved. I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order 42G be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
Will as many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendment to Standing Order 216.
Madam Chairperson, I move that Standing Order 216 be amended as proposed in the standing orders, in the order paper. Now, Speaker, as you may have realized, Madam Chairperson, as you may have realized, to effectuate these amendments, a number of roles are assigned to the majority leader, or leader of majority party. But, Madam Speaker, we are contemplating that where the government is formed by the minority party, the minority leader should be able to perform those functions. That's why this particular amendment is to provide for the functions of the leader of majority with regard to questions to be discharged by the leader of minority in the event that the minority forms national government. Thank you.
I propose the question that the amendments to Standing Order 216 be now approved. I now put the question that the amendments to Standing Order 216 be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Amendments to the second schedule.
Madam Chairperson, I beg to move that the second schedule of outstanding orders be amended as appearing in the order paper. And Madam Chairperson, for the bodies of doubt, this relates the supplementary order paper that was circulated earlier as approved by the Honorable Speaker. Madam Speaker, this relates to renaming, one, the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs to Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Security. The other one relates to renaming the Departmental Committee on Blue Economy and Irrigation to Blue Economy, Water and Irrigation. Madam Chair, I beg to move.
I now propose the question that the amendments to the second schedule be now approved. I now put the question of the amendments. Okay, please. Honorable Kangogo Bowen.
Madam Chair, I want to contribute on this amendment, the second schedule, I think. Especially section B, Madam Chair, which is seeking to change the name of the Committee of Blue Economy and Irrigation. Madam Chair, what is indicated there, and this amendment, Madam Chair, is an amendment which we did in the Committee of Liaisons, which you are chairing. And I want to confirm, Madam Chair, that this is not what we passed in that committee. Madam Chair, the name first is supposed to be Water, Irrigation, and Blue Economy. And the chairs are here. We have chairs who can bear me witness. So it's supposed to be Water, Irrigation, and Blue Economy. That is what we approved. But again, Madam Chair, I have seen that maybe your clerks or the chair, the liaison committee, they amended some things because there was even further amendments, Madam Chair, which was even seeking a further mandate of this committee. Madam Chair, the committee which you chaired gave the Committee of Blue Economy the mandate of maritime affairs. The maritime affairs, Madam Chair, and the chairs who are here, we passed a resolution. And Madam Chair, to remove the maritime affairs from Committee of Transport to Committee of Blue Economy. But there is a kind of mischief from the clerk's office, Madam Chair, and I want, if we have the minutes of the Liaisons Committee, which we passed at the Hilton Curtains, Madam Chair, to be tabled here. So I don't know why this amendment or the amendment of the Liaisons Committee were mutilated and were not passed as per what we agreed. And the chairs who are here, Madam Speaker, can bear me witness that there were more amendments to this committee than this.
Chair, as regards to the order of the name of the committee instead of Water, Blue Economy and Irrigation, it's just, I want to persuade the chairperson, it's just a matter of nomenclature. If you look at our second schedule, Blue Economy appears as the second committee, departmental committee under that, and they wanted to retain it that way. No harm intended, no mischief intended. So I want to request the chairperson to just accept that we call the committee Blue Economy, Water and Irrigation. It doesn't in any way interfere with its jurisdiction or mandate. It makes it tidier for naming and nomenclature and our standing orders. Nothing more than that.
Yes. You may proceed. You want to
Chair, I think the mover has really put it in the right context in terms of naming, and I've also just been explaining to the chair of the Blue Economic Committee that the other matter on maritime is yet to go to the House Procedures Committee. So the liaison committee, the changes to the standing orders are domiciled in the House Procedures Committee, not the liaison committee. Therefore, as at when it goes to the House Procedures Committees and it is passed, maybe that's when it can come. Name is what?
Yeah. May I now put the question? I now put the question that the amendments to the second schedule be now approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Can call the mover.
Honorable Chairperson, I beg to move that the Committee of the Whole do report to the House its consideration of the amendments to the National Assembly standing orders and its approval thereof.
I put the question, which is that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the amendments to the National Assembly standing orders and its approval thereof. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now call upon the chairperson.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the amendments to the National Assembly standing orders and approved the amendments to the National Assembly standing orders.
Mover, you may reply.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the House do agree with the committee in the said report, and I also request Honorable Mboko to second the motion for agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House.
Honorable Speaker, I second.
I now propose the question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. May I put the question? I now put the question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Will as many as have to, of that opinion say aye? Aye? Will as many as those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 8, motion, report of the 42nd session of the Organization of Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific States and the European Union Joint Parliamentary Assembly.
Honorable Didi Raso, you're the mover. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Report on the 61st session of the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States, OACPS Parliamentary Assembly, and the 42nd session of the OACPS-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Maputo, Mozambique, from 25th October to 2nd November 2022. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that this House notes the report of the 61st session of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States Parliamentary Assembly and the 42nd session of African, Caribbean, and Pacific and EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. Honorable Speaker, the Kenyan delegation to this particular important assembly was led by the indomitable, the Honorable Gladys Boshole, the Deputy Speaker of the Kenyan National Assembly. The attendees from Kenya to this particular assembly were drawn from both the members of the National Assembly and the members of the Kenyan Senate. Also taking into consideration across the divide, the members of both the opposition and the governing side. Honorable Speaker, the OACPS is a very important organization for the Republic of Kenya because it is through this particular organization that we have been able to get UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, in 1972 to Kenya. And also, it is through this important organization that we have been able to get the Kenyan nomination to the Security Council in the year 2021 as one of the 15 non-permanent members. So for that reason, this is a very important organization that we, as Parliament of Kenya, must take note. Honorable Speaker, for the information of the House, the OACPS-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, formerly referred to as ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, is one of the organs of joint institution established under the Cotonou Agreement. Honorable Speaker, the Cotonou Agreement, which came after the Georgetown Agreement of 1985, where actually the ACP itself was formed, is a precursor to what we are witnessing today between the cooperation between African, Caribbean, and Pacific states and the members of the European Union. Honorable Speaker, the Cotonou Agreement is a treaty between the European Union and the African and Caribbean states. It is only Cuba that actually is in that region, but is not a member of this organization. The main objective of partnerships is about sustained development, eradication of poverty within its member states. Honorable Speaker, the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly comprises more than 320 members of parliament from the 79 Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States and members of the European Parliament, drawn from the 27 member states of the European Union. Honorable Speaker, before the exit of the UK, there were 28 members in the European Union Parliamentary Assembly, but now there are only 27. Honorable Speaker, the main objective of this partnership is fundamental in us trying to understand what is it that it is based on. It is based on 3 pillars: development cooperation, economic and trade cooperation, and political dimension. Most of the countries in the OACPS are the countries that have been largely colonized by the countries in the north, in the European Union cluster. And for that reason, they have a very clear and linked association. And it is for that reason they are able to cooperate on matters to do with development because it is in their interest. For example, although the UK left Kenya almost 6 decades ago, but they are still interested in what goes on in Kenya in terms of development because they have interest. In the West African region, where most of our countries in the ACP cluster are drawn, the French or the Francophone are really interested because they have really invested in that region. And that is why the issue of development is key. Secondly, it is trade cooperation. Although we produce commodities in the South-South, but the North that have colonized us many, many years ago are interested in those commodities to refine those goods in the North. So trade cooperation is such an important pillar. On the political dimension, here we are looking at democracy, the rule of law, the Bill of Rights, and all those things that encompasses both the social dimension and the well-being of the human race. And that is why they will tend to be interested in our elections. They will tend to see how these elections are organized for them to cooperate in them. Honorable Speaker, the Joint Parliamentary Assembly currently meets 4 times every year, twice in Brussels and twice in one of the ACP and EU countries on a rotational basis. The immediate meeting that we are discussing today was held in Maputo, Mozambique, as representing the African cluster group. Honorable Speaker, negotiations have been ongoing for a new partnership agreement, which will serve as the new legal framework for EU relations with 79 African, Caribbean, and Pacific states that will address global challenges and set priority areas. The main ones are democracy and human rights, sustainable economic growth and development, climate change, human and social development, peace and security, and migration and mobility. Honorable Speaker, if I just touch on climate change. In climate change, we see the effect of climate change in much bigger way. Although in Africa and in Kenya in particular, we are experiencing severe drought, short rains, maybe very heavy downpour once the rains come. But in the Pacific, some of the islands are sinking because of the rising sea level. It is indeed a matter of great concern. Then, on the issue of peace and security, I think a factor that is with us, the issue of terrorism, drugs, money laundering, and when you come down to our case today, we are experiencing banditry and cattle rustling, whereas it is internal, but it has an effect on the largely global Kenya in terms of how we do our things at that international level. Honorable Speaker, during the 42nd session of the Parliamentary Assembly, it was informed that the new post-Cotonou agreement has been set for June 2023. The Assembly was also informed that the reason why the European Union group could not sign is because of matters that were raised by one country, Hungary. However, provision for the Cotonou Agreement have been extended until the new partnership agreement between the EU and the ACP countries enters into force. Honorable Speaker, the discussion on the post-Cotonou Agreement, initially it was largely about trade and development cooperation. At a later stage, the issue of political and governance came on board. And a new matter that is arising, it is the issue of human rights. Whereas it was not in the initial thinking when the Cotonou Agreement was signed, the European Union cluster feels that the issue of human rights must be discussed as an important piece within the agenda of both the economic development and governance. Honorable Speaker, it is important to note that once the new agreement is in place by June 2023, the OACPS-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly will meet once every year in Brussels and once each of the within the 3 regional blocks of Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific. In this, Honorable Speaker, it is the feeling of the OACPS, or the African, Caribbean, and Pacific states, members of Parliament who attend this particular session, that they do not want or they do not wish for the 3 groups to be divided into regional clusters. You know the saying, if we are united, we are strong. If we are divided, we are weakened. So the attempt to try and negotiate or talk sweetly with different regions at different times in 3 separate places means that eventually the attempt is to pull us in 3 different directions. That is really going to weaken us. Honorable Speaker, this assembly runs with three principal committees. The Committee on Political Affairs, where Kenya is a member. The Committee on Economic Development, Finance and Trade, and the Committee on Social Affairs and the Environment. Madam Speaker, just to comment on the three committees on the political affairs, it largely speaks to the issue of governance, peace and security, while the Committee on Economic Development is largely about trade. A few years ago in this parliament, we are able to pass the EPAS, Economic Partnership Agreement, where Kenya negotiated as part of East Africa. Although not all East Africans agreed to that, but EPAS was passed, largely based on the individual national interest and also on the basis of what is it that is common to the region of East Africa. Madam Speaker, the Committee on Social Affairs and Environment discusses the matter of women, youth, the issue of climate change, and also the issue of economic empowerment for these different cluster groups, including people living with disabilities. Honorable Speaker, the Committee on Political Affairs, where we as Kenya are a member, held its debate on a number of issues, one of these being enhancing cooperation on maritime security and promoting the rule of law on the oceans. What we must take cognizance as a country that sits on the Indian Ocean rim, we are both gaining because of exploiting the resources of the Indian Ocean, but also we are met with the challenges that are coming to us as a result of occupying this strategic position on the Horn of Africa and also the larger Indian Ocean rims. In this, maritime security is a complex and dynamic nature which can greatly affect national security. 70% of the world surface is ocean, and 2/3 of world waters are high seas, that demonstrating the importance of this issue. Additionally, 3 billion people, mostly in developing countries, depend on the oceans and seas for their daily social and cultural life, indeed for their livelihood. Maritime security is under threat due to contested boundaries and navigation routes that do not conform to international law, depletion of natural resources through illegal, unreported and regulated fishing, armed attacks, crimes at sea such as piracy, robbery, and terrorist acts. These all are found on the high seas in the international waters and also the littoral waters. That is called commonly referred to as the territorial waters. For that reason, I think Kenya is engaged with having a Coast Guard that largely addresses on the issue of the blue waters, and also the Kenya Navy that largely addresses the issue of the high seas, so that there's freedom of navigation and movement of international shipping lines are within our waters. Honorable Speaker, we have addressed Kenya's effort to address these matters through establishing of a Ministry of Mining, the Blue Economy and Maritime Affairs, and establishing of the Kenya Coast Guard Service, among others, to deal with issues of maritime security. Furthermore, within our region, there is the Coordination Center that is in Seychelles for this particular effort of coordinating maritime matters within our region. Honorable Speaker, it is also noted that emphasis needs to be placed on review of maritime laws to address the current climate and come up with approaches for dealing with issues that were multi-pronged and multidimensional. Honorable Speaker, on matters regarding the political situation in the Organization of African and Caribbean and Pacific States, the issue of the Kenyan election of August 22 was updated as a peaceful election that was considered across the world as a major step in the advancement of democracy in Africa. The issue of climate change is also a matter of concern, where the Republic of Vanuatu in the South Pacific was seeking to have the United Nations General Assembly to adopt a resolution that would enable them to engage the United Nations International Court of Justice to obtain an advisory on the responsibility of the global north with regard to climate change. Honorable Speaker, this particular state is seeking the support of OACPS to take the international community, particularly the developed countries, to the ICJ, because they feel that most of their land is disappearing underwater because of the rising sea level. And they really want international attention on this, and Kenya's support is being sought. Honorable Speaker, the other matter of importance in Kenya that our delegation was able to raise at this particular forum is climate change that has contributed to resource-based conflict in Asa region in Kenya, especially where the socioeconomic activities like nomadism are still practiced. Honorable Speaker, another matter that we must inform the House is the issue of withdrawal of South Africa from OACPS. South Africa being a major player in our region and a country that is of great concern is what today we are saying. If South Africa withdraws, Kenya or Nigeria withdraws, what happens to this particular organization? Yourself. Honorable Speaker, I'll be winding up. This is a very important organization, and that is why I said it is important for us to really educate the House on this. The state of play on the Cotonou Agreement. Following 2 years of negotiation, consensus was reached on the text of the agreement, and it was initially laid to April 2021. However, because the negotiations have not reached the end, this is largely exacerbated by the issue of migration, sexual and reproductive health and rights that has prevented the agreement from being finalized by the initial expiry date. Honorable Speaker, I wish to conclude by saying this. During this particular OACPS Parliamentary Assembly, the Kenyan delegation was grateful to OACPS because last year, that is 2022, we were actually heading this organization where the president of Kenya then, Uhuru Kenyatta, was actually the chairman. And it is during that time he was able to mobilize and consolidate effort that eventually led to support for us in the Security Council. Then during that time, I think Kenya achieved many milestones: establishment and operationalization of ACPS Endowment Fund, revision of Georgetown agreements towards making OACPS an international organization, and hosting of the first ever intersessional summit of OACPS, head of state and government, and conclusion of EU and OACPS new agreement. In conclusion, Honorable Speaker, the issues discussed at this past session of Joint Parliamentary Assembly are very relevant to our existing situation. The issue of climate change as a first. I thank you for this opportunity to brief the House, and I ask members to support this report. And I want to ask the indomitable leader of majority, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. You know, when a gentleman who served in the Kenyan military asks you to second, you have no choice but to second. And I was asking who is seconding, and he said, you. So I have to comply, and I therefore, Honorable Speaker, rise to second the noting of this report by the Organization of Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific Parliamentary Assembly and the 42nd session of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Honorable Speaker, allow me to thank members of this delegation led by our own Deputy Speaker, the Honorable Bol Sholei, the Honorable Owino, and the Honorable Jane Kihara, who I note are all here this afternoon. I don't know whether the Honorable Owino is in the house. He might have been somewhere in Upper Hill organizing some resistance movement. That's why probably he's the only member of the delegation you will not find in the house this afternoon. But notably, Honorable Speaker, the ACP-EU comprises of more than 320 members of parliament from 79 Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific states, and members of the European Parliament, which are drawn from 27 member states of the European Union. Honorable Speaker, the main objectives of this partnership were to push through sustainable development and eradication of poverty in or within the member states. And Honorable Speaker, it is indeed commendable that we had a strong delegation led by our own Deputy Speaker, who you know is a very good mobilizer, and she was issues that pertain to African states at the forefront of discussions at this assembly, and we want to commend them. But, Honorable Speaker, if you look at the objectives of this partnership, it speaks to issues that are very current to us. Issues to do with sustainable development and the eradication of poverty, Honorable Speaker, as was agreed on in the Cotonou Agreement, Honorable Speaker, are issues that are pertinent not just to Kenya, but many African states, and indeed those of the Caribbean and Pacific states, as also is the case also in the European member states that are represented here because of the global recession and the war in Ukraine and Russia, Honorable Speaker, you know, even many European states and their economies are not doing very well. And therefore, there are lessons to learn and between all of us. And none, either the Pacific states or the African states or the EU states that are in this organization, has nothing that they can't learn from each other. Each state has something that they can learn to each other. And it is good, Honorable Speaker, even as we send delegations to some of these very important bodies, we send delegations that will be able to articulate issues that concern the people of Kenya and indeed people of the African states. And that's, Honorable Speaker, I noted at the beginning of this motion that at a time like this, when we are discussing such important issues pertaining to the eradication of poverty and sustainable development, Honorable Speaker, you can see the state the House is in today. And notably, I think it is only this side of the House that, and a few members that we have donated to the other side, because I think from the other side is only the Honorable Harry Kombe that I see. The Honorable Agnes Pareyo, you know, as much as she's on the other side, she is a very focused legislator and sits in this House throughout and articulates issues, especially issues touching on the girl child. And we have seen her work even before she became a member of parliament. Therefore, I want to commend them, but also encourage the others who are busy out there that the space and the place to discuss issues to do with poverty eradication, the place and space that you have as elected members of parliament to discuss matters pertaining to the development of the people that have sent you to Nairobi to represent them, is on the floor of the National Assembly and the Senate. Because I have seen our colleagues in ODM, not even Azimio, because I don't think I saw anyone in Jubilee there, other than the former member for Ndaragwa, who is now famous for carrying sufurias and spoons in town, talking about some resistance movement. And I wondered, if you are resisting the work that the people of Kenya have elected you to come and represent them in the House, the only good and fair thing to do to the Kenyan taxpayer is not to resist your work as a member of parliament. Just resign as a member of parliament. Then go and protest in the streets. But you cannot be earning a salary as a member of parliament and you are telling Kenyans that you are resisting your work as a member of parliament and at the same time using the taxpayers' money to be paid a salary to do nothing. Honorable Speaker, the issues that are contained in this report, because I hear the member for Nyandarua in Kipipiri speaking about relevance, I am speaking to issues that are very relevant to the people of Kenya. Issues to do with food security, issues to do with national, regional, and world peace. There cannot be peace and stability in the world, not just in African states, in the Pacific states, in the European states, if people are hungry, if people are stealing from their own countries and subjecting their people to perennial poverty, if leaders are lying to their people, that you can resist a government that is established constitutionally and established by those people through the vote. You cannot do that, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, it is good, Honorable Speaker, that we also, even as we engage with the world out there, we engage among us to ourselves and be open to each other and be able to look at each other in the eye or in the eyes and tell each other the truth. And that's why I'm speaking to my colleagues in the minority, that please, You cannot be telling people the same things you told them during the campaigns. I have seen a long communique that they have issued from somewhere, talking about William Ruto, Rigathi Gachagua. The things they said about William Ruto during the campaign are the same things they are telling Kenyans today. The same things they told Kenyans about Rigathi Gachagua during the campaigns, they are still telling Kenyans that today. Kenyans are tired. Kenyans want to hear you articulate issues that relate to their daily livelihoods. How will you make gas cheaper? How will you make fuel cheaper? How will you use your positions as members of parliament and as elected leaders to make life and, more bearable and bring down the cost of living? We just passed the appropriations bill last week, Honorable Speaker, and there were interventions, and hopefully, because I have been engaged in the process, to look at the budget policy statement critically to ensure that it is aligned to the value chains that the government has prioritized, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that we do not repeat the same mistakes that we did under the handshake regime of just talking about the big four, a big four that was never followed up with actual budgetary allocations.
What's your point of order, Jared Okello? Honorable Jared Okello.
Honorable Speaker, I've been trying to nurse my patience, and I'm a very patient person as such. I think the matter before us is a report from OACPS, which has properly been done justice by my friend, the Major. And if the majority leader has so chosen to go off tangent, and that is very typical of him lately, and I do not know why he loses his cool each time the opposition plays its cardinal role in this House and outside this House. Madam Speaker, we have a duty on behalf of the people who elected us and the people that are persuaded by our movement, Madam
Honorable
Speaker.
Jared Okello, don't be tempted to debate.
No,
Please raise your point of order.
My majority leader here, a man that I respect so much, has gone into lengths to castigate my party leader. And I think I will be remiss not to offer a rebuttal to him that we have just finished our communique with the general public. And we are saying mass action begins today. And on the 20th, there will be a mass movement within Nairobi that may end up in State House and check out all the thieves in that house.
Order, members. Order, Honorable Jared Okello. You also started very well, but from what I've listened to, have not heard the mention of a party leader. And the issues that happen out there, you will not prosecute them here. Yeah, go on, Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. You know, at times it's good to allow the Honorable Jared Okello, being the only ODM member of parliament present in the House today, to at least be seen to be defending his party leader. But I can also assure Jared Okello, there are no people to threaten in this government. And there will be no handshakes. And you can take that to the bank. You can protest, you can scream at the top of your voices, but there will be no handshake. We know what the handshake did to us in this country. Honorable Speaker was saying, if you look at the Cotonou Agreement, which, if you see in the report, was due to expire in February 2020, this agreement aimed to reduce and eventually, or hopefully, eradicate poverty and contribute to the gradual integration of the ACP states into the world economy. And it was based on 3 pillars. One, which is the issues I was speaking to, and maybe that's why the Honorable Jared Okello, because I'm sure he has not even seen the report, he's not able to relate the issues I'm speaking to on development, on world peace, to the issues. And let me just mention to him, read to him, that it was based on 3 pillars. Top among those pillars is development cooperation. 2 is economic and trade cooperation. And that is why the EPA comes in on trade and economic cooperation. And C is the political dimension. And that is why I was speaking to issues, Honorable Jared Okello, that relate to the political dimension. Yeah? And also relate to development. Because one of the things that we should learn even as we engage with other member states within the OACP-EU, is that democracy is not something that you just talk about when it is convenient to talk about. That even as you engage with the other member states that are practicing real and true democracy, where people hold elections and allow their people to go on with their lives after elections, when governments are established, you do not come to destabilize the same governments with threats of grand marches, I don't know, grand demonstrations, grand, what did you call it, boycotts. At least last time you said you are boycotting some milk products because the leadership in the regime then were milk processors. This time around, I'm wondering, what are you going to be boycotting? I hear the Honorable Jared Okello shout from his seat that they will be boycotting eggs. You cannot boycott eggs because eggs are being produced by Kenyan farmers in Kikuyu. Eggs are being produced by Kenyan farmers in Nyando. Eggs are also being produced by Kenyan farmers in Nairobi. If you go to Ruai, you will find Kenyan farmers. Even in Kibra, there are people doing kienyeji chicken and selling eggs in Nairobi. Therefore, you cannot be talking about boycott of eggs. And the issues that relate to trade and economic cooperation. We are talking about economic cooperation and integration of our region in the East African community. You cannot be sabotaging that economic recovery, then pretend to be speaking about integration and economic integration with other ACP and EU states. It must begin from us here, that we must ensure, one, that we are able to work together as a country to work towards economic recovery. And I've seen things in the recent past, Honorable Speaker, relating to the economic recovery, and I see a belated attempt, again, by people who served in the other regime, now pointing fingers at each other. And I've seen one former cabinet secretary even purporting that the president has opened hospitals that are still under construction. And I wondered, how confused can people be? That you are even purporting that the president has opened a defense hospital, which I see every day as I drive to Kikuyu on Wayakiwe, still under construction. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, if we are to talk about the political dimension, we must, as member states of OACP-EU, be able to encourage each other to believe in democracy. And that is why, Honorable Speaker, when we were going through the motion on order number 9, and I was hoping my colleagues would be here, because when we change our standing orders, as we have just done, Honorable Speaker, to allow members of parliament to ask questions to cabinet secretaries, is because we want to pursue the objectives of this Cotonou Agreement, that we will have governments that are accountable to the people, that we have governments that will allow democracy to thrive and allow even members of a minority to ask questions and hold government to account. And you have a government that we have said that is not afraid to be held to account. Unlike the handshake regime, Honorable Jared Okello, that would not bear questions, leave alone being held to account. This is a government that is telling you, you have the freedom to demonstrate, so long as you do so peacefully. And from your ranting out there, I hope you mean what you say, that it is peaceful picketing. Nobody has a problem in this country if you even come and picket outside Parliament. So long as you don't block the gates, don't stop me from coming to do my work or stop Jared Okello from coming to do his work. If you want to picket outside the National Treasury, go and picket quietly. Probably the National Treasury will even be kind enough to offer you bottles of water or sodas during this very dry season. But please do whatever you want to do peacefully, but allow the people of Kenya to move on, so that the people of Kenya want to integrate and become part of that global economy, as this report is telling us, as signatories of the Cotonou Agreement. Therefore, if we have to pursue the objective of the Cotonou Agreement, if we have to be respectable member states of all these organizations, not just OACP-EU, all the other member state organizations that we are members, even the AU and the UN. If we have to be respected, we must be a country first that respects itself, a country that respects the democracy that we speak about, because it is one thing to speak about democracy and another thing to practice democracy. Therefore, when we lose elections, just like those who lost in Kikuyu constituency or those who lost to the Honorable Jared Okello in Nyando, conceded and are moving on with life. Even those who run for president in this country must learn, like the Honorable Waihiga Mwaure and others who ran for president in 2022, conceded and considered that they had lost the election fairly. Those who never conceded went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court made its determination, and they were okay with it for 6 months, until a time came and people were told to pay taxes, and they thought they can intimidate government with demonstrations and the other cheap threats that we have seen this afternoon. And I want to encourage them, even as I second this motion, Honorable Speaker, to remain faithful to all these treaties and agreements that we sign as a country, because we don't sign them as government. It is not this government that signed this Cotonou agreement, it was previous governments. But we remain faithful to the objectives that was set out under the OACPS-EU agreement. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, because I see my time is over, I beg to second.
Okay, members, I then propose the motion that this House notes the report of the 61st session of the Organization of Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific OACPS Parliamentary Assembly and the 42nd session of the OACPS-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 30th November, 2022. The first chance to contribute to this motion will go to the member for Molo, Honorable Kuria Kimani.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute to this this report on the 61st session of the Organization of Africa, Caribbean, Pacific States Parliamentary Assembly that was agreed on in Maputo, Mozambique. Honorable Speaker, I was admiring how the leader of majority was able to bring politics around this and make a good communication to our friends in the opposition with such ease. And I was telling him how I admire how he was able to relate this agreement to politics and and even get my friend on the other side to even want to respond. But Honorable Speaker, one of the things that I really notice that this report does is that it recognizes the sovereignty of African countries and countries that are on this agreement, respect to our constitution and respect to our values and traditions. Because, Honorable Speaker, we've had a very bad trend of where especially the West is giving Africa and African countries aids, whether it is through donations or any other aid to these countries. They imagine that we must also follow what they think is right and what they think is their way of life or what they are calling their human rights. Honorable Speaker, I was just trying to check around, countries like Scotland. The men wear skirts, and it's okay for them. And I was actually thinking, even when it appears awkward when we think of a man wearing a skirt, but then actually our Maasais wear lesos, and we don't see it as awkward. When countries like the British, they practice monarchy. They have a king. When the queen dies, the king takes over. After the king dies, then someone takes over. And somehow we still think it's okay, it's a democracy. But when perhaps the people of Rwanda elect the president over and over again, then it appears like there's no democracy. Of when our neighbors in Uganda re-elect His Excellency Museveni over and over again, then we get to be lectured as if it is not democracy, Mr. Speaker. So I really take cognizance of that this report actually gets to realize the sovereignty of our countries, respect for our values, and that we are going to allow you to have your monarchies, and you have no problem with it. The people of Scotland can wear their skirts. But for here, we are saying things like LGBTQ has no space for for African countries, and especially, for Kenya for this matter. And now that recognition of that we can conspire, we can agree on many things that we agree on supporting of economies, on trade. But when it comes to values that are dear to us, when it comes to traditions that are dear to us, then there we are going to stamp our foot that you're going to obey our constitution. Those things that are illegal, for example, the discussion about same-sex marriages and all that, will remain illegal in the Republic of Kenya, Madam Speaker. I like the energy in which you're talking about the unity of these several African countries. But perhaps, I was asking myself, Madam Speaker, perhaps is it the right time now to consider having a common currency for Africa? A conversation that has been ongoing for many years, but because when you look at, for example, the weakening of the Kenya shilling and other, especially African currencies against the dollar and strengthening of the dollar, I'm like, part of it is because we are demanding, every country, every African country is demanding for that one single currency, dollar, different currencies. But perhaps if we had the African dollar or the African shilling, then we will have it be so strong, and the things that we have now to deal with, like a price, like increase of prices, the challenge you have with our imports, we wouldn't have to really deal with them. So I'm doing a clarion call to our African countries. There is more that unites us than the one that divides us. And if then we're able to have that economic revolution, that economic unity, including and not limited to even sharing one currency, then we would be able to individually and collectively solve a lot of global issues that tend to affect our countries. And with that, just a quick response to what the Leader of Majority alluded to, on the discussions that have been ongoing this week, the discussions by one of the constitutional office holders and a former CS, is that the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning has been approved by the Speaker to do a public inquiry on the 6.142 billion shillings that was paid through abuse of Article 223 to buy out telcos. And we're telling them, stop sending those reports on media. Stop sharing your WhatsApp messages on social media. You're going to have a chance to come to the House that is mandated to oversight expenditure by the executive to explain yourself, to tell this country exactly what happened during those days that are alleged happened as it is reported by the report on Treasury. And with that, Madam Speaker, I beg to support.
Thank you, Honorable KK. Honorable Jane Kihara, you are part of this delegation. Let us hear what you have on the report.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. First and foremost, let me support this report and also say that I was lucky to have been in the delegation. It was an eye-opener for most of us. And being what it is, because it was National Assemblies, we were lucky to have our very able leader of delegation, Madam Speaker, Madam Boss. And those who have not been, because parliaments by nature are transitional. So we had very many new people like us who did not understand. And I must say also congratulate or commend our clerk, Gertrude Tebet, because she has the issues on her fingertips and she was able to assist those who have not been there before. We also got to know that sometimes this European Union is not honest with us or with the regions, because it wants to impose some issues that maybe we may not be able to take. They have refused to take also responsibility of their undoing, because there are things that they have done in the past and when they colonized us. So it was clear from many countries or many assemblies that we were not prepared to be colonized again in the name of funding. Like it has been said, there were issues that we brought out. We said there is nothing, we cannot make conclusions out there unless, because we have a constitution here, we bring it here to this house and amend. And it can only happen if it is amended in this August House. Madam Speaker, there are issues that were very good, discussed very in detail at various committees, like economics, trade, and everything that works for the good of the mankind. But again, the dishonesty comes when European Union wants to divide the regions so that they deal with individuals, with individual states or regions, Caribbean EU, Pacific EU, and Africa EU. This one, the whole assembly did not agree, because they said, or we said, there is no then need to call it a union if you segregate in regions. Madam Speaker, it was clear that from the assemblies that we can only be able to work with European Union once we are united. And they want to separate us because we have the numbers when it comes to voting. So that when it is Africa, African Union, Africa and EU, and then Pacific and EU, when we are divided, they'll be able to override us in their aspirations. Madam Speaker, our leader of delegation was able to articulate a motion that she has brought in this house and we have passed of pesticides, and it was supported by the floor because they are bringing pesticides that they are not using in Europe. And this one was very well discussed or articulated by her. There were people who would vote on how Kenya is voting, because Kenya is very critical. The three parliaments that were visible, Kenya was one of them. It was very clear that Nigeria was missing. We know they will have their elections. South Africa, having pulled out, is also a disadvantage to the region. So what came out is for institutional memory. For example, we were talking about Maputo. The delegation that was there, or those of us who weren't there, we were not in Maputo. So if there is every need for purposes of institutional memory to have members who have been in the last assembly meeting in Maputo to be the ones that are in Brussels and also in the next one. This one will help the country to follow up for purposes of institutional memory, like I've said. So, Madam Speaker, there is an issue of deforestation that they brought. And our delegation was able to articulate that you cannot be able to not advise actually, because they're not advising, is to tell us how to manage our forests. Because they are saying if you cut just a line, then you are not liable for funding because of deforestation. And we were telling them they are the people who did the biggest deforestation here when they colonized us, because they are the people who brought things like coffee and tea by clearing our forests. So, Madam Speaker, let me support this report, and please let me also congratulate our leader who was able to lead a mutiny so that everybody was voting the way Kenya was voting. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear Honorable Jared Okello.
Honorable Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity. And just a while back, I had a very good banter with my majority leader here. I wish he stood around. I could have given him a little clarification. But on the level of dispensation of justice, you never condemn somebody who has no opportunity to rebut, and therefore I will sidestep that. However, I was taught that the best way to measure level of fear is through reaction over people when a message has been passed. And that has been properly demonstrated here, that the Azimio advances instill a lot of fear across the aisle, and therefore feeds into our objective. And therefore I like that very much. The OACPS-EU Parliament, as has been ably alluded to, was established so that certain democratic ideals within the member states could be safeguarded, Madam Speaker. And we all understand that it is a democratic parliamentary institution that discusses a range of issues mostly akin to what we go through in this House, Madam Speaker. Its main objective is to promote and defend democracy, and that is why each time there is an election anywhere, we tend to see the European Union sending a huge delegation as an observer mission group. Of course, we all understand that during elections, the observer mission group tends to only follow the script of what has been decided by electoral umpires in those nations. It is only in Nigeria last week that I found the European Union disagreeing with African Union as to who got elected to be president and the process that was involved into the entire exercise. And I think if the European Union would stand its ground going forward on this, then imposters in state houses will be reduced. It rotates its sittings, which is a very important thing, that whereas they sit in Brussels once a year, other succeeding meetings are held across the member states. How I wish also that this parliament can rotate across the country and say next week we are holding our sittings in Kisumu, because nothing really stops us from doing that. And through that we can properly connect and reconnect with the electorate, Madam Speaker. The OACPS discussed in depth issues of Somali car bombing that happened last year, October, and 100 people lost their lives as a result. In this country, we have also had our fair share of attacks by terrorists. And OACPS-EU Parliament, through discussing all these issues, bringing it to light, can, to a larger extent, eradicate issues of terrorism, which has become a huge thorn in the flesh of so many countries. We have suffered Westgate attack, Dusit attack, the American embassy attack in this country, and many, many other small attacks by indoctrinated groupings in the name of terrorists. And therefore, discussing these matters would bring it to light and help come up with hypotheses based on syllogisms to counter these emerging issues, Madam Speaker. The blue economy sits at the core of consideration of this parliament, and we know that Kenya is currently undergoing a complete reconstitution of our blue economy so that we can also tap into the resources emanating from this, Madam Speaker. And we encourage issues of territorial boundaries. We understand we had an issue with Somalia on the Indian Ocean waters, and this parliament can also help us address these kinds of issues, Madam Speaker. I don't know why this thing is blinking just 1 minute after I started speaking. And people have been talking here 20 minutes uninterrupted. Madam Speaker, I like the fact that they have a mechanism to fast-track progress of their resolutions. And this is an issue that we need to also emulate in this country. Many things are discussed in this parliament touching on the lives of our people, but there is no follow-up. And that at the end of the day, we end up missing the mark when certain pertinent issues, and so critical as such, need to be addressed. I'm glad that it talks about poverty eradication and the trade treaties. I remember I moved a motion in this House on EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement between Kenya and the United Kingdom. And we need to also step up our efforts so that we engage lots of treaties. I know there is one coming up between Kenya and the United States of America that is currently hitting a snag, but how we can, embark very seriously.
Honorable Jared Okello, I'll add you 2 minutes.
I thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the 2 minutes. So the trade treaties, as I said, we need to fast track most of them. When we were doing the EPA trade agreement in our last regime here, we came to the realization that we are only doing 5% of tea exports to the United Kingdom. And we were looking at the best ways of moving it to at least 15%, as a result creating jobs within this country and thereby mopping up all the revenues that are stuck abroad. Right away, our country is suffering dollarlessness. And this, by way of improving our trade, this can help address those kinds of issues, Madam Speaker. Then we need to employ very powerful trade negotiators, Madam Speaker, because many a times we experience unfair trade practices. So how do we ensure that through this parliament, Kenya stands at a vantage position to seize every little opportunity, that at the end of the day, we attain a favorable balance of trade, unlike increasing lots of imports to the detriment of exports, and as a result, the country suffers. At a time when youths have no jobs, people have been trained in various cadres of trades, but they have absolutely nothing to do. So opportunities abound abroad. We only need to increase our levels of presence together with negotiating skills, that at the end of the day, we can capture what belongs to the Republic of Kenya. And therefore, I support this report on OACPS-EU that has properly been done by our friends who represented our country in Maputo. We only need to balance the representation. I have seen the entire entourage was only picked from UDA. And I don't think that portends well for
You're
our
out
country.
of order,
I
Honorable
thank
Jared.
you, Madam
Honorable
Speaker.
Owino was in that delegation.
Out of 10,
he's
you had
actually not in the
Honorable
House.
Wino. Yeah, so out of 10, you had Honorable Wino. I thank
Your
you.
time is up. Honorable Wanjiku Muhia from Kipipiri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And from the onset, I want to support the report, congratulate the team, especially the team leader who brought his team together and was able to converse on issues that affect Africa, East Africa, Kenya, and our constituencies were discussed and passed. And from the whole report, we cannot see issues that were discussed which Africa is against, like LGBTQ. So I say congratulations to this team. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, as I start to support, I want to make it on record that as the chair of regional committee, I get concerned that such a joint assembly meeting and others do happen while there is no representation of any member from regional integration committee. Though it is administrative, I want to put it on record that it is necessary because time and again these bilateral talks and this agreement ratification, they find their ways in my committee, and as members we are meant to discuss issues that we never interacted. For avoidance of doubt, Regional Integration Committee is created under Standing Order number 212. Among its mandate, we are supposed to examine the records of all relevant debates and resolution of the meetings of the Pan-African Parliament, the African, Caribbean, and the specific Union Joint Parliamentary Assemblies, and other regional integration bodies. This is on C. And if though I am not having the standing order, I think in B, we are also supposed to examine the records of IALA. While for IALA, we are able to interact with the members because we can call the members here or ourselves go to Arusha and interact with their debates. We get very disadvantaged as a committee where we are supposed to examine this kind of a debate and agree into it, yet we did not interact in the report in whichever way. So I put it on record that when these delegations are formed, it's important for them to consider at least a member from Regional Integration Committee, not necessarily the leadership, but at least a member. Having said that, the joint assemblies, Honorable Speaker, are very important. They are just like regional blocks. And regional blocks come together for political reasons, for trade, for security, among many other reasons. When we look at this report, it was resolved issues that are pertinent to Africa as a continent and also Kenya. They discussed very well issues of climate change, political affairs, economic development, and human rights. If I may touch on climate change, this is real, while EU is part of this joint assembly and many other assemblies, including the Interparliamentary Assembly that happens many times in Geneva. We are sure, without avoidance of doubt, without any doubt, that climate change has become what it has become today, majorly being contributed by these foreign nationals. We are sure because here in Kenya we have very few factories, while they have factories and such which contribute to the emission. Honorable Speaker, I'm not sure if you are speaking for 5 minutes or 10, because from the beginning of this debate I didn't hear the mover move the procedural motion on time. And I am not sure if I have already spoken for 10 minutes, but I'll reorganize my thoughts and quickly speak of climate change is real, is not only a threat, but a disaster to the country. And as such, the government must invest more on green energy because it will be environmental friendly. And on this green energy, The government must invest on issues like solar, on issues like wind power, but be careful. Honorable Speaker, I am almost requesting for 2 minutes like Honorable Jared, because as the chair of regional integration, I may have wanted to summarize the regional interest.
2 more minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I speak quickly on green energy, that the government need to invest on this because climate change is not only a threat but a disaster to in the current times. Food security is also a threat, which is commonly now in the whole of Africa, and the government through the Ministry of Water may need to consider how we get water harvesting to the prone areas where there is flooding, and other measures engaging the public very strongly on afforestation through the presidential program. Personally, I'm promising to do more in Kipipiri in afforestation. Honorable Speaker, the EU should also offer sustainable modern farming techniques. And I have seen in this report that there was a call for EU to ensure that the cost of compliance are not transferred to the producers. Honorable Speaker, because you come from Gilgil constituency, I'm sure you're aware what happens in Naivasha, and our flower farms really have high cost of production of flowers because the kind of pesticides that are advised they should use sometimes are not even manageable, and even the ordinary farmers who are doing the French beans and such. So as much as these joint assemblies come and indicate they are helping Africa or every other participant, including themselves in one way, they must also see on the other way how this happens. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, I want to say that these joint assemblies are necessary, but also important as a country to find why some countries are also exiting. We have read in this report, country A have exited, the recent being South Africa. So why are countries exiting from this kind of joint association? And when we go for bilateral agreements, for instance, the EPAs, and Kenya lead the talk and we do the signatures, and we find our neighborhood like Uganda, like Tanzania getting very hesitant, we also need to find how to ratify together. Finally, Honorable Speaker, on trade negotiators, I agree fully with Honorable Jared that we need very strong trade negotiators because we are aware, for instance, the issue of the railway gauge. We know this railway gauge was constructed with huge amount of money. And when you go by train, you see quite a number of houses constructed irregularly because I don't believe they are ever used. I think these are kind of the strong negotiators of the trade for benefit of our country that we need in every bilateral that we intend to ratify as a country. With that, I thank you very much and I support this report.
Thank you. This chance will go to the MP for Runyenjes, Honorable Eric Mushangi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to speak. And from the onset, I wish to support this report. The African, Caribbean, and Pacific States and European Union Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Madam Speaker, I want to say that the resolutions that were made in this assembly are resolutions that are very important for the growth and stability of Kenya and the region. And looking at the report, very important issues were discussed, including peace, security, economic development, trade and investment, and also climate change. And Madam Speaker, we all know that there cannot be security without peace. We know that there cannot be development without peace. And so we cannot talk of economic growth if there is the absence of security and peace. So I wish to agree with the delegation that went to this meeting and the deliberations that they made, and say that the issue to do with climate change, Madam Speaker, is an issue that is alive to the majority of the people. Right now, we are experiencing the drought situation in our country, and especially in the arid and semi-arid areas. We know that in those areas, what has been their culture, that of keeping livestock, it is now a very difficult thing to do because of the dry weather. And the European Union coming on board is a good idea, because that is where we have the first world countries where industrialization first happened. And so there is need also to ensure that in these negotiations that the European Union comes to support countries like Kenya, so that we can embark on afforestation and ensure that we have regular weather patterns. Madam Speaker, also, it is important to note that the issue of labor migration has become now a very important aspect. And I am encouraged to see that countries are coming together, and the coming together of these countries is also enabling the market negotiations, like the tea, coffee, and even the miraa negotiations. And right now, Madam Speaker, I wish to bring to the attention of this House that there is another opportunity for Kenya, and it is in the labor migration sector. And right now, the labor migration is fetching our country more foreign exchange than the tea and the coffee sectors. So I am looking forward to a time when these forums, the OACPS-EU and the EU, will do more of bilateral labor agreements, so that we can offer our young people opportunities to go and work abroad, fetch Kenya more foreign exchange, and ensure that we grow our economy by the remittances that will be done. Madam Speaker, also, the discussions also are centered on poverty eradication, and it is a fact that the drought situation in this country is causing Kenyans to experience difficulties in putting food on the table, and it is important that countries come together so that we find solutions that are facing our people. So with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. This chance will go to the member for Kericho, Honorable Beatrice Kemei.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this chance, opportunity to contribute to the motion that we have today. From the onset, I must appreciate the fact that we have this very, very important motion. I want to support. I want to actually support the report that we have concerning the assembly, the joint assembly between the Organization of African and Caribbean and Pacific States together with EU. And maybe first is to say that as a country, we cannot be on our own. And the fact that we've been having the East African communities working together, and then there was a time that we were never together, now we are back. There was so much that happened during that time, but when we were not together, even our trade went down. So I support this motion, knowing that when the African countries together with Caribbean and Pacific come together, they become stronger. Matters of trade is one of the areas of concern, which is economic, and being trading partners here is very key with the EU countries. And tea, coffee, horticultural crops, and the many others are part of the crops that we have in Kericho. So to have them being sold in the world market, and especially with the EU, it will be stronger, or it is stronger when we have the OACPS. So I support this assembly for that matter. And apart from the tea and the coffee, knowing that Kenya is an agricultural country, much of our products are agricultural. But the prices, in most cases, there's fluctuation of prices in the world market. But having this assembly, our prices will actually be looked into. At the many industries that we have, we can have machines from those countries. It will be of great help. The processing industries, at least with this assembly, with the report and with the joint assembly, our industries will also improve. And Madam Speaker, climate change is an issue that is not only for Kenya, not only for Africa, but it is a concern for the world. But knowing that the many gases that are emitted to the atmosphere come from many of those, maybe the countries that are well developed, mainly the EU and the others, for them to accept and join with us, at least the issues of climate change will be looked into. So as members of the OACPS, we'll be able to have a conversation and issues of climate change, not forgetting that funding is mainly from those donor countries, will actually be looked into. I would also want to point out that we have the waters that we have, like the Pacific Oceans, the Caribbean areas, the waters, the oceans, and the seas have been overexploited. Because of this, the fishing, overexploitation of the fishing, the waters of the sea through fishing, they are not regulated. And coming together will actually help us to follow the law. And not only that, and with this assembly, Madam Speaker, the threats that goes to the oceans, including pollution, will be looked into. And I believe the EU will listen as the other members do the same. When we come to environment and the natural resources, we have very many natural resources like the minerals that have not been exploited because of inadequate capital. But when we have these countries and the organizations coming together, or the EU and the OACPS coming together, at least our trade and our environmental resources will be exploited and managed very well. It will not be overexploited. And Madam Speaker, fighting against the devastating effects of climate change, as I've said, will be done not only by one, but with many other of these countries. So I really support this coming together. But when it comes to afforestation and reforestation, the idea that they wouldn't want us to maybe to cut some trees to plant our tea, I am not in support of that. Remembering that they started cutting our forests so that they plant the trees. That is in Kericho, and they are still owning those trees, those to plant the tea. I'm saying that we can do afforestation and agroforestry in line with that. So I support everything else, and I believe they will not tell us not to plant more tea in the name of afforestation. We know how to do it. We do agroforestry, and that's what we've been doing. So ideally, I support, not forgetting the human rights, democracy, and governance, which is also very, very important, mainly the gender equality. I know they will support, and they are there to support us with gender.
Order members, what's your point of order, Honorable Memusi?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise on a point of order, Standing Order 35. Madam Speaker, looking at the House, it is obvious that we are lacking quorum to transact. Please guide.
Order members, I will order that the bell is rung for 5 minutes. If we don't get the requisite quorum, then we can adjourn at that point. Order, members. There being no quorum at the expiry of 10 minutes and the time being 5:40 p.m., order, members. Order, members. Order, members. Order, members. Honorable Beatrice. There being no quorum at the expiry of 10 minutes and the time being 5:40 p.m., this House stands adjourned until Tuesday, 14th of March, 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
So that you are given what?